weeks ago, I kind of picked up on something in one of Katie's videos, something that I had failed to recognize for so long, for years. In fact, I'm going to argue and say that all of us have missed this, and that's a travesty. Katie has been issuing a call for help for years, and no one has answered her call. I think it's high time that someone pay attention, someone try to change this travesty. The travesty in which I'm speaking of is living in Minnesota. Now, before people come for my head here, especially Minnesotans, I mean, I get it. I love where I live. I would be upset people talk shit about it too. But please know, these are not my words. These are Katie's. She has described a horrible existence in Minnesota, and I think it's time someone call attention to it. So please, follow me on this journey, and let me show you what it is I mean.
Across the street is a detective, and the dude is, you know how like detectives can end up being like targets for criminals? This is the coolest thing about his house. I haven't been in there, but he told me about this. He has hidden compartments throughout his house where guns are hidden. Criminals go after detectives. They'll try to show up at like a judge's house or a cop's house and try to like kill them and shit. So when he built his house, he built secret compartments throughout his house where he hides guns.
Oh my God, I wouldn't want to live near a cop either if doing so brought on some sort of hellfire. I mean, where I live, police officers bring about free coffee.
But like, I have a lot of neighbors that are all about Second Amendment rights, like having their guns. So like when we moved in and we were Democrats, they're like, oh God, you want to take our guns.
Let me fill Minnesota in on something here. If you're a gun-loving Democrat, where you want to be is upstate New York. I mean, we carry a lot of the same values and everything as Democrats, although I would classify us as a little bit more progressive than Democrat. But more importantly, we love our guns.
People are cruel to us every single day. It doesn't matter if we're at the store and my son is acting out, or if we're just in our neighborhood. Kids don't play with him. Our neighbors don't speak to us. That's not exactly how I imagine parenting.
See, now I hear that, and Minnesota just sounds like a place I wouldn't want to raise kids. I mean, you guys are clearly making a child who's an innocent victim in all this, you're clearly making him pay for sins of the mother, and that's just wrong. I mean, come on. And I mean, let's face it. Sure, Katie may not be the most approachable person, but
that one woman who told me that was in my neighborhood, and with that single comment, she took away all of my friends. And I lost my best friend.
If she was fortunate enough to actually find a best friend, then it's just wrong to take that away from her. And what kind of language are you all using that you can do that much with one comment?
We had a neighbor, or not a neighbor, like someone that is within our community that was on with her husband a couple of years ago. And she was so terrible to her husband. And they had this, she was actually on the show, I think, twice.
Okay, now this show that she mentions, the reason why she's even talking about this is because she's explaining to her viewers how this show contacted her and, discussed the possibility of her coming on the show. Now, the whole thing that changes the context of this discussion is when you determine which show it was. Like, say, we're talking about Jeopardy. Hey, that's pretty cool. But we're talking about the Dr. Phil show.
Then my neighbor on the other side of the wall, he's like standing right at the fence. And I'm like, come on, Frida, let's come inside. And he just starts screaming at me, cursing at me. And I'm like, what the hell? And he's like, get your dog inside, yelling at me. And like the last time he did this to me, he threatened to use like stuff on our dogs. You know what I mean? Like he wanted to dispose of our dogs. And then he's like screaming at my husband's screaming at him. And he's like, we lived here first.
The only thing worse that I can think of than like a homeowners association is one that is ranked by seniority.
you have dogs, your fence is on our property. And we were like, we had this property staked out when we put our fence out. You know, they came and they did the survey and they put stakes, and he goes, you moved the stake. He's like going off on us. And my husband's finally just like, you know what? He goes, and the guy goes, he's like, everyone hates you. And this is what he says to my husband. And my husband's like, why? And he's like, because you're an a-hole. And my husband's like, no, it's because I'm a liberal.
I get that it's confusing at times to simply see a white, privileged, entitled, wealthy, suburban heathen as an asshole, but he's just a liberal.
We have the wrong political affiliation.
You know, if only our country did something like, I don't know, something that collected data from all of its citizens all throughout the country and put it together and made it available to the public. You know, maybe even did it like every few years or something, you know, maybe even 10 years. I don't know.
They would always like tag us on Facebook and try to fight with us about stuff. And it got to a point where like we've had to block like all of them because they were like all trying to bait us into these ridiculous arguments.
Oh my God, like just freaking TP our house like normal people. I mean, Facebook brawling baits? Come on.
Like last year, 2 years ago, I got a rainbow flag, which is on the thumbnail for this video. And so within like, I don't even know. All this, we've been here 7 years. In that time, we've had, our car had rocks thrown at it. We have had our pumpkin smashed, which isn't that big of a deal, but you know what I mean? Like, our house has been egged. Our house has been silly stringed. And then most recently, our flag kept falling off, and it was weird.
You see, and it had to have been you neighbors, because what else could it have been? Like, there's no way her friend came back from beyond the grave to take it down.
So my husband was like, well, maybe I'm not getting the right brackets, or maybe it's this, or maybe it's that. And over like the 2 years we've had this poor flag is in shreds. Like all of our other neighbors have flags, and their flags are not shredded like this. And the other day, my husband was like outside, and I noticed the flag was down. And he just told me tonight that when he went outside on the flagpole, like there was like a big bolt, you know, like, because we have a big post on our front yard, our front house, like a big, like, you know, those tall posts, whatever. And he said that the bolt that was like bolted into it was like all the way bent down, like someone had been hanging on the flagpole to try to take the pole down or something. And that like it's been removed from our house so many times. We've like found it down the street. It's like, and it's windy here, so you'd think, okay, some of this is wind, but it's just the amount of times this flag has been off. It's shredded now. It has tons of holes. And all of our neighbors have flags, by the way, and none of their American flags look like our pride flag. It's like this flag has been decimated.
How could you spend more on a higher quality flag for your property than they did?
We had to put that flag out there. That's literally what he said. You had to put that flag out there. Not as liberal as you, is what he said. You had to put that effing flag out there, is what he said. We put the flag out. We have dogs that bark. They don't like that we have a flag out, which means we support people loving. Love is love.
She has a pillow. Respect the pillow.
It's 2020. And you know what else they're doing? They're getting all the other neighbors to talk shit about us so that they all don't like us.
Well, it's either that or they overheard our screaming match. And let's face it, if it involves me, it must be a conspiracy.
I mean, but these are the same people that were like yelling about special education. You know what I mean? Like they hate everything about us. No matter what we do, no matter who we are, no matter where we go, everything we do is wrong.
No matter what we do, no matter who we are, no matter where we go, everything we do is wrong.
Could your kids not throw rocks at my car? Like I have a chip in my car because they were throwing rocks at my car. They threw rocks at my baby when he was a baby. But we're just sort of like, whatever, we just want to keep the peace.
Wow, it's one thing to throw rocks at someone's kid, but to chip their car? Now let's hear all of that once more, but with feeling.
We moved into this neighborhood 7 years ago. We built a house. We wanted to just raise our family here, and we also wanted to be ourselves. We are not like our neighbors because we're just not like our neighbors. And a couple years ago, we put out a flag. We were targeted almost immediately because of our political belief. We're not like the kind of people that overtly talk about politics all the time. To be honest, it's just like not something that our family does. And one of our neighbors who's not liberal targeted us immediately and started baiting us on Facebook into fights. And we blocked them, and they are not stopping. We just wanted to live in this neighborhood. We keep to ourselves. Like, my son is sick and we just do our thing. We have dogs, like most of our neighbors do, that bark. Like most of our neighbors' dogs that bark. But they've targeted us because we're Democrats that believe that gay people should have rights. And we have a flag out on our house that we put out to honor my friend JB who died. And I knew it was because of the flag, but he finally just said it. Today he finally said it. The flag has been ripped since we put it up. They've bent the flagpole. Our house has been egged since we put that flag out. They've silly stringed our house. They've threatened to kill our dogs. Today he threatened to kill our dogs and he threatened to kill us. And he's riling up our neighbors. And then they called the cops on us. And they came here and they're like, you didn't do anything. And I said, they said it's because you have that fucking flag out there. Like, are you serious? It's 2020. Didn't say that. The cops said that if they start targeting us because of the flag, that it's against the law. It is a hate crime. He said, you have that fucking gay flag out on your property. And I said, that's it. That's why you're doing this to me. He called us names. He told us we're terrible people. He doesn't know us. We've lived here 7 years. He doesn't know us. My boy is here, yes. And then I was like terrified because the cops showed up. And I was like, he threatened to kill us. Or he threatened to kill our dogs. And he said, that's a threat. I'm threatening you. The fight was about the dog, but the fight, it has nothing to do that they don't like us. Your dogs, it's that flag, nobody likes you, everybody hates you, you're such an asshole. Like, it was just crazy. It's a pride flag, like a rainbow flag for pride. That's a flag, just a pride flag. See? And they've ripped it. Look what they've done to it. I just didn't know people could be so hateful. Like, I don't understand. Do people think they can bully us out of the... No, they haven't had an issue with us. Literally, it just happened like within the last couple of years when we put that flag out. So my husband said, like, you're only doing this to us because we're not Republican. Because we were targeted immediately when we moved in here because we're not Republican. And because we, are advocates for the LGBTQ+. Yes, the Christmas lights are still up, but it's April here and it's still cold. So no, we haven't put the Christmas lights out yet. I'm sorry. We live in Minnesota where it's cold.
See, now if this were all just over Christmas lights, it would totally be forgivable, but it's not. So, moving on, let's talk about home care nurses in the state of Minnesota.
And stuff, they're not there to change anything that's going on in the home. But our nurses have consistently, and it's at this specific agency, it's never happened at any of the other agencies that we've used, where they just have gotten so comfortable that they have decided that, they know that there's a shortage, and so they know that they can behave badly, and am sort of stuck. So I either have to put up with their bad behavior or I have to go without a nurse. And that just doesn't work. Demands. She
like threatened us to get rid of our dog. She told me that she doesn't have to work in a place that has stinky diapers. I mean, come on. It's ridiculous. Like she didn't want to be in a basement. One day she didn't want to be in a room. Another day she didn't want to be in his room because she said that she just can't sit in a room all day and be with my son. But that's literally what she's hired to do. And then if I pointed out that she was staff, she would accuse me of being rude or treating her like an animal. That's actually what she called me. That's actually what she told me yesterday, was that I was treating her like an animal and I wasn't respectful. And on the surface, I acted very calm and collected and like I liked her, and I would tell people I liked her, but I didn't like her. And I felt extremely stuck. And the last 2 weeks, on Fridays, after all of her shifts were done, I melted down to my husband and was bawling. And I cried almost all day yesterday. Yesterday was probably the most terrifying day my son has ever lived through. He was shaking. I mean, she was ballistic. I literally thought she might hurt both of us, and I thought I was going to have to call the cops. And she told me she didn't have to leave my house, and it was really scary. And my son didn't understand because he's autistic and he has a low IQ, and he believes that when mommy is yelling.
I mean, come on. Surely nurses in other states love being around stinky diapers and having to spend their days in basements and bedrooms, right? I mean, it has to be just Minnesota that has an issue with this, right?
Tell you a story. The day after Trump won, I live in a small town. The day after he won the elections in 2016, and we have a very conservative town that is racist. But when Trump won, it like emboldened the racism and it amplified it. The day after the elections, there were anti-Semitic and racial slurs graffitied all over the high school. There were more hate crimes reported than at any other time in like the recent history. You can't deny the hate that was created, and even within my own community. Making people feel empowered to speak out and condemn people. Like, I had an interaction over the summer with someone within my community that decided that they were going to talk about special education with me, knowing that my child is disabled, and say that if my son can't do what everyone else does, he shouldn't be in school. There's just no reason for a child that has a disability, if they can't keep up, why should the public have to pay for them? Why should they have to deal with it? It's not the public's responsibility. And I do not feel like in any other time would anyone have been so bold to say that than they were during this last 4 years. It happened in front of my neighbors. Literally no one stuck up for us. I was screaming. I was fuming. If your child can't do that, they shouldn't be in school. Because we were talking about how they needed to increase money for special education. If children can't keep up, they don't need special ed. They don't need to be in school. My innocent child is sitting like in a pool 5 feet from me. And I'm like, you are literally saying this to a mom of a child that has all these disabilities. I was about to go through the roof. I was about to like scream and yell and like, how dare you? And everyone just sat there paralyzed. No one wanted to say anything because Trump made this community and this world and this country a place where if you stood up to hate, they were more powerful. If anyone would have tried to defend me, those people would have just gotten worse. And it's like, My son deserves an education. My son deserves to be at school. My son deserves all of those things. I don't have to stand there and listen to you tell me that my son, if he can't keep up and if he needs a nurse or he said, no child needs a nurse at school. Every child needs this. Every child needs that. If they need that, if they're so expensive, they shouldn't be in school. It's like, for real, you should never treat a child like that. They were very ignorant, but it's more disconcerting that I live in a community where no one will stand up for you. And I feel like that's just how the world...
Okay, now this example, I admit, can get a little confusing because in previous recollections, what she had said was that her neighbor said that special education students should go to a special education school instead of the traditional public school. Now, regardless of what your feelings are on that, I'm not touching. I'm just pointing out the discrepancy in her recollection of events. But either way, according to her, her neighbor said something to her. Now let's start to wrap this up with another story about local police.
Most arrogant officer I've ever met in my entire life. And he was really cocky and he talked to me. I just solved this recent red rum and I'm a really good detective. I mean, that's literally like how he treated me. Like I should be applauding him for solving it, you know? I would say Detective Mike was like your classic misogynistic asshole of a cop, not the kind of cop you want to do your work at all. I felt like the cop gaslit me. That's what it felt like. I felt like he was gaslighting. And it was funny because I was trying to find him on the website and I don't remember his last name. His name is Mike. Oh my God, you guys are contacting them? Oh my God. Oh dear. I tagged them on Twitter. I don't know. I honestly just tagged them on Twitter. And I said, it's been 4,885 days since you said you were going to call me and you haven't called me yet. But I tagged them on Twitter, so we'll see if they respond. I said, I have a really large platform and everyone's going to know what you guys did. Sorry.
Now let's quickly wrap this up with some stories of her childhood so y'all can hear just what hell you've put her through.
Yay. These girls basically told me that I needed to stop being so opinionated because the boys didn't.
I was horrendously bullied because of my ADHD. I get into like arguments and stuff with everyone in school, and I would like fight with the guys that were like, and I grew up with a lot of very racist boys, but people were really, really ignorant there. I didn't really fit in. I never dated the boys in high school. So long story short, I left St. Anthony and I never looked back, and I will never go to a high school reunion. I have zero friends that I talk to from high school. I literally hate St. Anthony.
Now, I don't know about you, but what I'm taking away from all of this is that Minnesota just sounds like the most horrible place to live. I mean, poor Katie Joy.